What's going on, guys? Today is a very exciting day. I'm going to be finishing up this huge warrior kind of night dark art piece on the stomach. We had one session before, today's the second session, but today what I want to focus on with you guys is how to do a fade. So this is a 3RL piece, and all throughout the piece there's going to be like little fades going from dark to light. You know, big variations of this, small, detailed. So we're going to attack it from every approach, and I'm going to go through it with you guys. This was something I really struggled with when starting with the 3RL, is how to just get a nice clean fade, you know, from dark to light or light to dark. So, you know, obviously we started the shading, kind of have these like lines scratched in on the top. We're going to be completing this today. I want to show you guys a little something in this kind of like wrist plate area. So like I said, we're going to be talking about fades today and also details. This is kind of a small area. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be leaving this area light and this area dark. So I'm going to bring my fade over from here, the darkness, leaving kind of the light source hitting here on the cuff, right? So that's what we're going to be trying to accomplish right now. So as you can see, I made these little like indents here. So that means it's pushed back, right? It's indented into the cuff. So I'm going to hit those first, you know, with just kind of a little light gray to make them darker than the rest of the plate. And then I'm going to bring my fade over. Let's get into it. So I'm going to be running at 4.5. I got a standard 3RL in there. So there are many different ways to approach shading in with the 3RL. If we want just kind of a flat standard tone, you know, you come in circles, you're trying to get like really consistent. But when we do a fade, a lot of times I will start in the darkest area of the fade, which is going to be, you know, on this side, and as we get to that side, it will be lighter. Because this thing is curved, we're going to leave a little bit of a light source in the center because it will curve up, right? It'll curve up, and then this center will be the furthest piece out, right? So it'll be like the first thing to hit the light, and that's on like, you know, cylinder type objects, right? You know, I have my dark line starting here, and right now I'm just kind of going back and forth to redefine the line. I did see in some of the comments people were asking me if that's the way I line. That is not the way I line. That is just me like shading, you know, in the direction of a line. And you'll see me do this to like, you know, clean up certain areas, sharpen, or like I'm doing now, just redefine. So it's not black, it's not a line, just shading in that line. So I have that, and what I'm gonna do for this fade is I'm gonna pick and flick, right? So I'm gonna pick and flick off that line. So where I pick, it's its darkest, and as I flick and come up, the needle gets farther and farther away from the skin, therefore making it lighter. So I'm gonna show you a little bit of this, a little bit of how I do this, so you can see the flick, you know, and you can see by the line, it's nice and dark, and as it gets farther away from the line, it's a little lighter. And this is a very small difference we're talking about here, but if you repeat this pattern over and over and over with your fade, you know, it will start to develop the fade, right? So that's what we're gonna be doing over there. Just kind of expert the fade. So real quick, before we get farther into that, I'm just going to gray out my little indent tones. Now it's so important always, you know, remember where your light source is on this. Our light source is like over here. So I'm gonna just make this outside a little darker because the light is gonna have a hard time getting in that area. So this will help produce the effect of the indent. So now we're kind of talking about little detail fades, you know? So I made that, you know, dark line there, and I'm flicking off the line because that's like a little drop, right? And our light is gonna come from this way, and then it drops, you know? So it's gonna have a hard time The light's gonna have a hard time getting in that like sidewall. That's how we like kind of create that effect. All right, so we have our indents in, and now we can really pay attention to the bigger fade, you know, the fade across the whole thing. So we're gonna go back to the pick and flick method. You know, so I'm coming right here, and I'm just flicking. And I'm doing it over the entire thing. I'm gonna build that up a little bit. I'm just doing the same motion. I'm gonna build this up a little bit so that you guys can kind of get a better look on what this method will produce. You know, and when doing this, always make sure you're getting a really good stretch, make sure the skin is tight. This is just gonna make your quality of fade even better. And you're trying to get these strokes, this movement, like consistent. The more consistent your hand motion is, the more consistent the fade is. So you can see, you can see what we got going on here. By this edge, it's very dark. That's where we're picking in and flicking out, and it gets lighter. And I'll wipe this away so you can kind of see our effect. But you're starting to see this fade develop in there, right? So the pick and flick method is really good for fading out from a dark line, or a dark area, because as you pick, it makes that starting point pretty much black. As you continue to fade, you can see how it's darkening. One thing to be careful about with this method is if you're flicking too hard, you could show a directional pattern. What I mean by that is it would be very easy to identify like where you're shading from. And you don't always want a directional pattern. Sometimes you want a little smoother look. So let's say we're doing, the pick and flick method. Like let's say I'm just doing this same motion. I'm going straight up, straight up, straight up. Awesome, we're building our fade, but then maybe there's too much directional pattern. We want to like smooth it out a little bit. You're gonna do the same thing, but just kind of cross hatch it. So change the direction, So I might come down and across instead of coming straight up from the line. And then maybe I might go diagonal. And if you're always changing the direction of the flick, you're gonna get kind of more smooth, fade in there. All the dots won't be going the same direction, so it doesn't show the direction path. So the crosshatch method with the, kind of the flick method helps smooth it out. And then you can even do circles like I'm doing now, which almost is like a blending tool, just to blend them all together. And we see this like really nice, smooth fade developing. So we got the pick and flick, we have the cross hatching the pick and flick, and then we have the circle method to go on top of the whole thing just to smooth it out. Just like you'd use a blending tool, with charcoal, graphite, blending tool like colored pencils. It's the same idea. That's how I think of it. So let's continue this fade with those methods and see what we end up with. What's nice about the smaller areas, like doing a fade in a smaller area, is my hand can always reach the darkest part of the fade, so I can bring my fade out from that dark area. Sometimes when we're doing like bigger fades, like let's say it started over here and it ended here, I can't drag all the way from this black area, so I'll probably do another video on larger fades and how to keep them just as smooth, but you might not be able to reach your black or your dark part of the fade. But for now, for these small fades, we can reach the entire part of the fade, so that just makes our life a little bit easier. It's a little easier to get that smooth. Because we're working on the cylinder object, this guard here, as I talked about, it comes up So this top point, you know, hits the light before the sides, typically if the light is directly on it. So I brought my fade from that way. Now I'm gonna bring a lighter fade from this way. So I'm gonna do the same thing, just reverse. I'm gonna pull off from here. So you can see this wrist plate is starting to look round because I've developed this highlight in the center. And what I'm doing is I'm building the basic structure of the piece that we're working on. I want the highlight point to be like right here. I want the light coming from this way, just catching off the cuff here. So that's where our highlight point's gonna be, but we have our structure in there. You know, we've rounded it out. We've created the dark to the light fade. So just in my, in this design, I want this part hitting the light first. So that's gonna be the lightest part, but we have everything else in here. We have our structure, so now we're gonna build the value, meaning we're gonna make everything, a little darker, a little more contrast. So I'm going to use the circle method to just go over the whole thing. You've also seen me do this with a mag sometimes, but it's like, okay, cool, I got my structure in, now I just want to build the value. And it's going to make all those shades and shadows in our structure darken together, So we're not going to like lose any of our progress we did. If we only shaded in a certain area, it would start to morph the structure, but now we're just going over everything together. So we're making everything darker together. Again, like we're in a small area, so I'm able to reach the entire area. So that makes our life a little easier. Because if it was too big, I would have to balance it. Like maybe I would do, small circles on the half that I could reach, and then I'd have to match the small circles on the other half that I couldn't reach, But with this, we can reach everything, so we just are going over the entire thing. We just really see the value of this thing building. It still looks nice and rounded. We're going to define this a little bit because it's kind of a layered piece of metal, like a lip almost. And as it gets towards the light, I'm going to make it a little lighter. As it gets away, it'll be a little darker, more defined. And then I'm going to do a mini fade coming from the top. So I'm using the pick and flick method. I'm just flicking it out. These small areas, it's very hard to get smooth and not show the directional pattern. So we want to be very careful as we do this to not press too hard. But we're going to start to see it coming along, and it's going to look almost like it's coming towards us because the back of the cuff is dark. So you see it like coming towards us. And then I know I talked about making the fade in the really tight areas is difficult, but I did not give you a solution. The solution is the crosshatch, what I had talked about before. So if I'm just flicking a little like diagonal towards me, just do the reverse, as I'm building it up. I'll show you. So if I'm flicking down like this to compensate, then I'll flick out the opposite way. And that should help with smoothing it out, not showing the directional pattern. But you can see this cuff like really starting to develop. It looks really nice. As you can see, we have this really nice clean fade on his cuff there. It's looking pretty cool. We're eventually going to add a little gray in the background, which will make that pop even more. But yeah, so these techniques I showed you, I'm going to be using throughout the rest of the tattoo. It's going to be sick. So we are finished on this piece. This was a 2-day piece. So end of the second day, it is complete. I was showing you guys the fade on the small cufflink that he has, and we repeated that pattern throughout the entire piece. The pick and flick and the smooth out with the circular pattern. You can see a bunch of short fades in the armor where I would flick from the back of the armor forward, from the dark to the light, and then I was blending it out with the round hand motion. You can see some larger fades by the cape and some of the bigger shapes. You know, you'll see these longer, these more stretched out fades. And then all together, you know, we get the piece. I am thrilled with how this thing came out. It is a huge piece. Even standing up on him, it looks big, but when we get him on the table, we're working on him, we stretch out his body on the stomach area. That thing doubles in size, so this is a huge piece. You really have to be patient in this stomach area to get these things nice and smooth. You have to put the time in to get the blend. As soon as you start rushing these blends, these fades, you'll be able to tell it'll look choppy and messy. So we did not rush it. It came out nice and smooth. Love this piece. Thank you guys for watching.